I'm a fan of Farcaster. I have an account. I've had an account for a while. I got the invite from Dan, I think himself on Twitter, way back. But I still, it's they did raise money. They
Okay.
do plan to monetize, and so there is, I don't even know where the question is here, but there is clearly some polarity going on, sort of implicit. They raised money from VCs, and what is the exit strategy there in the long term? So how much trust can we have in the, not being rugged if we're going to build on top of the API in some way?
Yeah, I mean, really good thoughts. And first thing I'll do is dial back to I don't believe in perfection, so I'm not going to hold them to that standard. But I will say a couple of things. The first one, like I said, is 3 years they've walked the walk. And you can kind of, I think, especially in crypto, people tend to think of decentralization as without leadership, and I think that's totally incorrect. I think decentralization is much more important to have the ability to move data freely, move your personality and identity freely, and to be able to join the tribes that you want to. So if none of this appeals to you, don't join Farcaster. It's fine. I'm not going to take it personally. However, they continue to do what I think is right by most people. They recently integrated a number of different what they call cast actions with products that are built in the ecosystem. So they integrated two different ways to pay users directly in the feed, right? So if you wanted to do a transaction with someone or tip someone on their cast and just send them some crypto or send them some stable coins, you can do that using third-party services directly in the Warpcast feed now. You can also create polls using Ponder, which I'm a big fan of those guys, super sharp dudes. So they could have built native polls, but instead they opted to use this builder who's been in the ecosystem. And they also did one for Bounty Caster, so you can like post a bounty if you want someone to like help you out. Like I found the music for my podcast with a bounty. I was like, hey, I want to find like a Web3 like musical artist, and I really am in love with the song that I have for my intro. So you're absolutely right. You can't there's no guarantees. At the end of the day, we're all people. I think to John's point about devs talking to devs, we forget that there's like ultimately like no matter how much code you build, like people still need to interact with it. At least today, we'll see what happens with the AI. Um, but I also think I don't know if you guys are familiar with the seven powers, and I'm forgetting the author's name off the top of my head, but one of the powers of durable revenue sources or durable positioning is counter positioning. And there are a serious amount of incentive structures for Merkle to keep this free and open, because Merkle being the company that develops Farcaster and the Warpcast client that sits on top of it. Because part of their value proposition is not being the other thing. That's the whole point. They, today at least, by my estimation, would massively downgrade the value of their shares or enterprise value, or however you want to mention it, their FDV, by becoming the thing that they are setting out to be better than. So it's almost because the walled gardens exist that it makes sense for them to keep going. But I don't want anyone to think that I'm basing my estimation on some sort of like benevolent dictator situation. I think they're doing what's best for them, because I think they want to build a protocol that's different, that changes the world. There's probably some ego involved. I have no idea. I don't know any of them personally. But if you wanted to break down the old thing and create the new thing, the worst thing you could ever possibly do is become the old thing. And at a certain point, I think the hope, or the closest thing you can get to a guarantee, is at a certain point it really is unstoppable, even by the team that built it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I still, would really love to get a better understanding, and not necessarily from you, but just in general, like what the exit strategy is, right? Like why an investor, traditional investors would put so much money into a protocol. And I can imagine a bunch of different things, right? It's like if Farcaster sold off one part of their company to something larger 5 years from now, you can envision a world in which the ecosystem is developed enough that that one play, the exiting of a company doesn't destroy the whole ecosystem. In fact, it makes it stronger, right? It depends in part how, to your point earlier, how sufficiently decentralized the protocol itself is, right? If a corporation were to buy Farcaster as a liquidity event and then attempt to shut down the protocol, would they be able to? If the answer is yes, well, that's not so great, right? If the answer is no, I think that bodes well for the future of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think there's different layers to this discussion of decentralization, right? It's a continuum. So the technical answer today is, even if Merkle just exploded, like the hubs, which is the gossip network that like keeps the social protocol running, those are just being able to be run. As Dan has mentioned many times, there is no financial incentive today, only cost to running one of these. So unless you're building a product that needs all the data, extremely high fidelity and speed and liveness, then yes, it very much makes sense. To all the people waiting for an airdrop, I don't think it's gonna happen, guys. Sorry. No hubs token coming is my best guess, not financial advice. But ultimately, it's just a really hard question to answer, right? Because the other side of that coin is the mass majority of people who are betting on the Farcaster ecosystem, like myself as in my growth roles, or just like personally, as I spend a lot of time on there. The truth of the matter is, if Merkle was to implode tomorrow, it would lose a lot of faith. It would lose a lot of that intangible that's beyond the technical decentralization. That means that like we believe the protocol's going to grow. We believe they're going to keep doing the right thing, shipping new interesting features, making it a fun, like exciting place to be. And that probably wouldn't happen if there was no one stewarding it. So Dan again, the founder, has said many times, like his goal is to grow to 1 billion users. You need someone with skin in the game to basically steward that in, because anyone who's been in a DAO will understand like there are pitfalls. And he thinks they're the best people to do it. If at any point they're not, I would expect them to step down, or if they're unnecessary. But that day is pretty clearly not today. So we got what we've got. It's better than what we had before, in my opinion. And I spent a lot of time in like my personal life, maybe a little bit hand-wavy and esoteric here, trying to hold multiple ideas in the same space, in the sense that like it's not perfect, it is better, things could get worse, but they're likely to get better. And that's a pretty good like matrix to have for social media today, at least compared to any of the other bullshit that I've ever tried to use.
I think that's a good move, is to ask the question, I mean, compared to what, right? Is Farcaster a better or worse option compared to Mastodon? Or just like the pure idea, some perfect idea. And so, I think it's an important question to ask.
Yeah, well, it's also really like, it's very practical, right? Because like all of us have 24 hours in a day. Hopefully everyone's sleeping well. I encourage you to do so. So let's call it 16. What do you do with your time? Where do you spend it? You know what I mean? What do you believe in? What makes you happy? Hopefully, jobs are fulfilling and all these other things, but social connection is really important. I think a lot about Dunbar numbers and the issues that arise when things like the church have fallen out of favor, and we lose a lot of community. And I'm not saying Farcaster is going to fix everything there, but I've found a group of people and a place, and very happy to have John as part of the Chicago community now, where like there's not a lot of places. Like I would never post on Twitter like, yo, Twitter Chicago meetup. Are you kidding me, dude? Like most talks, like
No way.
0% fucking chance, right? Like TikTok meetup, like I'm good, dude. Like I'm fine on a TikTok Chicago meetup. Like I know I have a rough estimation what it would be, and I'm wholly uninterested. So at the end of the day, we all have to like sort of live in the real world. Shout out developers who live in the real world. And it's people, right? Like at the end of the day, it's people doing things. And I think that's somehow underrated in crypto. I don't know, for some reason, but it is what it is.
I think you brought up an interesting point that I wanted to tap on at some point. Like, Christians, let's say, can find other Christians, and it doesn't just need to be like use the hashtag Christian. So if someone cares enough, they can make a Christcast, protocol or front end, right, for the same protocol, plug in the same profiles, and it's easy enough to have your own little closed system where you can set expectations for your community, but it's built on the same data, the same validation, and the same historical references that the Farcaster protocol is collecting. And that's, if you want to have Mexicaster, Blackcaster, Irishcaster, whatever your groups are, that's something that you can build on top of this. And that itself seems to be a very liberating concept in that, there's the centralized kind of locus of data in the protocol, but how that manifests and who you want to manifest that with is up to you, and the degree to which you want to build your own system, your own kind of ecosystem.
Exactly. Like it started in like group chats, and then they moved it over to channels, which for people who aren't on Farcaster, somewhere between like a subreddit and a forum topic, where like there's some context available for like why you're putting information out there. So everything from really big channels like ZK knowledge proofs, or like I run one called Growth. I also have a personal one called Woofs, and it's just I don't know. I was up late one night and I was like, things that make you go oof. And that's how the channel started. And like, I got a couple thousand followers in there that I'm very deeply appreciative for. But ultimately, I think what you're getting at is boiling down to something that I call like fractional identity, which is the idea that like we are not like monoliths of people, right? The person I bring to a Farcaster meetup is very different than I bring to my father-in-law's birthday, right? Like these are like they are me, unequivocally they are me. But the idea that those two people are the same people, like you wouldn't fucking recognize one from the other, right? Like it's just not possible. So having a whole identity and then bringing the parts of yourself that you want to specific communities is something that I think is just like really deeply important to the human experience. I wouldn't expect anyone who grew up in a religious household to act the same way as they do at Friday night at a bar. Both are valid. I think both could theoretically be very important to someone, but being able to separate those things out and bring yourself to those communities as you see fit, and have the ability to like actually connect with those people, I think is something that probably still goes a little bit slept on, but we're seeing it surface more and more as more clients come out. There's ones for the Nouns NFT, for those who are familiar with that group. They put out a huge bounty for like, I don't know, a few $100,000 for people to build specific clients just for that NFT community, because they've got specific needs that they want to operate, and it's way easier to aggregate everyone if they've already got their identity, cast history, and paid their $5 to sign up.